So, when I was about 5 years old, I didn't even know what a video game was. The only television related content I knew about at the time were movies and TV shows. However, when I first visited my grandfather's house, I saw this machine sitting next to this old television. I thought, what is this machine? A videotape player? A music player? And then one day, I saw my cousin using it. When I first saw what was on the television, I thought, who's that pink circle? Is this a movie? Or a TV show of some sort? And then my cousin handed me the controller that was connected to the machine. As soon as I started pressing buttons, I was amazed. Whoa! He's responding to the buttons I'm pressing! I can actually control the little guy on screen? This is so cool! I immediately fell in love with this game. Now, I obviously wasn't great at it upon first playing it. In fact, I didn't even know about the copy abilities and kept losing to the boss fights and mini-boss fights. But I didn't care at the time. All that mattered to me was that I could control what I was seeing on screen. Because characters in movies and TV shows always moved in the exact same locations every time I rewatched them, I started to become more obsessed with video games purely because of a sense of control. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to play any video games often at a young age, mainly because my family never owned any video game systems until around 2005 when we first got a Nintendo DS. As for Kirby, I did still see him on television thanks to Kirby Right Back Atcha, but the only other time I got to see or play Kirby was at a cousin or friend's house. It wouldn't be until 2006 when I finally got to own a Kirby game for the very first time. And the first one I've owned? Kirby Squeak Squad, or Kirby Mouse Attack in Europe, for the Nintendo DS. I don't own that game anymore, but that's a story for another day. I wouldn't get to play Kirby's Adventure at my own house until around 2008, which was the year I got into emulation on the computer. So yeah, in case it wasn't obvious enough, I absolutely love this game. I've replayed this game multiple times, even to 100% completion, even on extra mode. Like I've 100%ed all 3 save files, complete with superstar ranking. So be forewarned, I have a lot of nostalgia for this game, so if you happen to hear me gush a lot, well, now you know why. I can't even begin to count how many times I've replayed this game, like, multiple times. It's very, very special to me. This game is very special to me. So that being said, let's pop this game into my grandfather's Nintendo Entertainment System, and let me show you my childhood. Man, seeing this title screen really takes me back. And now for the story. One day, the peaceful life of Dreamland was shattered by a mysterious crisis. The inhabitants didn't dream. On the edge of Dreamland, dreams and hope once gushed forth from the Dream Spring, fueled by the Star Rod. Investigating the Dream Spring, Kirby found naughty King Dedede swimming in its magical waters. Dedede had broken the Star Rod and given the pieces to his friends, who are now hiding in Dreamland. To bring back the lost dreams, Kirby sought the Star Rod. Then Kirby decided to leave town and become a hitchhiker. Now for the gameplay. Kirby's Adventure is a 2D platformer in which you control the little pink puffball named Kirby through 7 levels with multiple stages. And yes, I said 7 levels because they're not called worlds in this game. Each level has a hub world that contains the entrances to each stage as well as some bonus rooms. Much like in his debut game, Kirby's Dreamland, Kirby can move left and right, jump, float in the air, and inhale enemies in which he can spit them back out. But new to this game is the ability to dash by double tapping in the direction you want Kirby to go. He also has this slide maneuver, which is pretty useful for defeating most common enemies. But most importantly, this is also the first Kirby game to introduce copy abilities. Whenever Kirby inhales a certain enemy, he can copy their abilities by swallowing them. Some examples of said abilities being breathing fire, breathing ice, the ability to fire a laser, and even the ability to wield a sword or a hammer. But be warned, if Kirby takes damage, he will lose the ability he copied and will bounce out of him as a star. Though if Kirby can inhale that star before it disappears, he can immediately get that ability back. It's kind of like trying to hold on to your rings in Sonic the Hedgehog. There are also some abilities that can only be used a limited amount of times, such as Mike and Crash. There's also the sleep ability, which is completely useless, but hey, at least Kirby looks adorable while he's sleeping. There's also Invincibility Candy, which, as the name implies, makes Kirby invincible for a short time. He can find it either lying around a stage, or have it given to him by a masked knight named Meta Knight. Oh boy, here we go. When I first saw this character, I thought, whoa, who's that guy? Is he helping me or fighting against me? Either way, he looks so cool! Meta Knight is without a doubt my favorite Nintendo character, and second favorite video game character. After all, I have my username named after him. As well as Zero from Mega Man X, but yeah, you get the idea. Anyway, some stages also have some mini-bosses that Kirby must defeat before proceeding. Some examples being Poppy Brother Sr., a giant wrestling beetle named Bugsy, or one of the many encounters with Meta Knight soldiers. Now these guys can be pretty easy if you're just inhaling them like regular enemies, but ironically, these guys can actually be harder to defeat with specific abilities. For example, if you're using something like the sword, these guys take 2 hits to defeat, while these guys only take 1 hit to defeat. But if you're using something like the hammer, or even the parasol, then they all only take 1 hit to defeat, like every other enemy. Also, am I the only one who thinks that Meta Knight looks like he's flourishing his sword to the beat of the music? Some stages in level 3 and onwards also have hidden switches that can not only restore your health, but more importantly, reveal hidden bonus rooms on the hub world. Some are easy to find, while others are so hard to find that you may have to look up a guide to find them on your first playthrough. Whenever Kirby reaches the end of the stage, he will enter what's called the goal game. Once it begins, you need to press the jump button at just the right time so Kirby can reach the highest point. If he can reach number 1, he will gain an extra life. Aside from stages, there's also 3 mini-games that Kirby can play to earn extra points and extra lives. Those mini-games being Crane Fever, which is pretty self-explanatory, Egg Catcher, in which Kirby needs to catch as many eggs as possible while avoiding bombs, and Quick Draw, in which you need to attack at just the right time.
Ready, steady, fire! Well done.
Though if you attack too early, yeah, that happens. The hub worlds also have museums, which Kirby can visit to immediately gain an ability before starting another stage. There's also the arena, in which Kirby can fight a specific mini-boss. If you win, you'll not only get to take their ability, but you'll also receive a maximum tomato, which fully restores Kirby's health. And finally, there are also the Warp Star stations, which allows Kirby to warp to any other Warp Star stations found in a level. At the end of every level is a boss fight that Kirby must defeat to proceed to the next level. Most are pretty easy, but some can be very annoying depending on what ability you're using. Once you finish the game, you'll unlock the option to freely play the mini-games, as well as a boss endurance. But if you complete it 100% by finding every hidden switch, you'll also unlock Extra Game, which is basically the same as the main game, except that Kirby's health has been reduced by half, the mini-games are always set to the highest difficulty, and you can't save in this mode either. If you finish it, you unlock a sound test. That's nice. There's even a very familiar tune you can listen to that isn't present anywhere else in the game. As for what I think of the game, you probably already know the answer. But to go into more detail, I really love the levels, I love the platforming, and I especially love using the copy abilities. My favorite copy ability, while technically not the best, is definitely Sword. I really love how fast I can slash with it. I also like slashing in midair, that is, when it actually works. Some of the abilities are also pretty situational, like Wheel and UFO, but I still think they're very fun to use. Not counting Sleep, the only copy ability I honestly don't like using is Ball, mainly because it can be a pain to attack enemies with. Literally. Another issue I have with the game is whenever Kirby is attacked by an elemental attack, specifically fire or electricity. If that happens, Kirby will be knocked back for at least a full second, possibly longer depending on the slowdown, and he won't be able to move until he finally recovers from the attack. It can be especially annoying around bottomless pits. As for the boss fights, I think they're really fun, even though most of them can be pretty easy. My favorite boss fight is definitely, you guessed it, Meta Knight. For this fight, Meta Knight actually gives Kirby a sword before dueling, mainly because Meta Knight is very honorable, and he wants to make sure the fight is fair, yet again adding on to why I love this masked knight so much. As for the hardest boss fight, I personally think it's King DDD, mainly because whenever you attack him, he almost immediately responds with an attack of his own. It's especially annoying when he immediately responds with his Inhale ability. It's all about pattern recognition with this fight, so be on guard when facing him. Graphically speaking, it's easily one of the best looking games on the Nintendo Entertainment System. In fact, it's probably the most colorful game I've ever seen on the NES. The characters and attacks are also pretty well animated for the system. I especially love how smooth Kirby and Meta Knight's sword attacks are. And this only shows up once or twice, maybe 3 times, I can't remember, but I also really like this rotating tower effect in Butter Building. This game was released in 1993, back when the SNES was already a thing, and back when the NES was late in its life cycle, and it definitely shows. Unfortunately, the game looks too good for the system. The game has some annoying slowdown depending on how much is going on screen, although I did hear that the 3DS version fixes that issue. As for the music, I love it, I absolutely love it. This is without a doubt my favorite overall soundtrack across the entire Kirby franchise. Just about every song is extremely memorable, and they're all just so catchy. I really love Vegetable Valley, Grape Garden, Yogurt Yard, Orange Ocean, and especially Butter Building. I also really love Kirby's Victory Dance theme. It just sounds so happy. It basically says, "Yeah, I did it!" Seriously, I love this soundtrack so much, and I highly recommend giving it a listen if you haven't already. So, what more can I say? I highly recommend playing this game. It's on the Wii U's Virtual Console, it's on the 3DS as part of the 3D Classics, and it's included in Kirby's Dream Collection for the Nintendo Wii. I would also recommend the 2002 remake for the Game Boy Advance titled Kirby, Nightmare in Dreamland. This remake has enhanced graphics and sound, way better control of physics and mechanics, and best of all, new features. For starters, you can now play the game with friends, assuming you have the link cable and are both playing a physical copy on an actual Game Boy Advance, SP or otherwise. The game also has brand new and, in my opinion, better mini-games. There's also slight changes to the level design that, in my opinion, make the game better designed. And thankfully, all of the hidden switches are still in the exact same locations as the original NES version. And unlike the original NES game, you can actually save your progress while playing Extra Mode. You also have sound test right from the get-go. So, what's the reward for beating Extra Mode? I'm very glad you asked. Once you beat Extra Mode, you'll unlock Meta Nightmare, which is by far the best part of this entire remake. This lets you play as Meta Knights through almost the entire game. Meta Knight does have reduced health and can't save progress like in the original NES game's Extra Mode, but he always has his sword Galaxia and can use it to hack and slash away at anything that dare stands in his way. Whenever I replay this game, I'm usually going back to it as Meta Knight since, again, he's my favorite character. Another detail I really love is whenever you pause the game while you have an ability, you get this text about that said ability written by Kirby himself. Some of them even show that Kirby can be pretty confident in the ability he's using. Now, I know what you may be thinking. Do I think this remake is better than the original? Yes, I do. Though oddly enough, I used to think the complete opposite when I first played the remake. Because I was so used to the mechanics of the original game, I was constantly thrown off when using copy abilities. The best example I can think of is the sword. While on the ground, Kirby swings it noticeably slower in the remake than he did in the original game, so I kept getting hit when Kirby didn't slash fast enough. Though I did like how the air slash was way more useful than it was in the original NES version. And when I started to play the remake like all of the other modern Kirby games, I began to enjoy it way more than I did previously, and I now agree that it's definitely the best version of the game. So yeah, if you haven't had the chance to play this game, please play it whenever you can. It may not be my absolute favorite Kirby game, but it's definitely my favorite game for the Nintendo Entertainment System, and definitely one of my top 5 favorite Kirby games of all time. With that being said, I give this game a 9 out of 10.